And we are off to the races. So, Tom, whenever you're ready to go.
3, 2, 1. Welcome back to this week's Sweet and Salty Movie Review Podcast. This week, I am sweet.
And I am salty. And we are back, even though no one realizes we were gone because we did a podcast last week, but we weren't about, well, I wasn't about last week anyway. I was in India. But how have you been, Tom?
I've been all right. Not too bad, thank you. And how was India, more importantly?
India, one of my favorite places in all the world, India. I love India. Amazing food, amazing people. I got to drive a rickshaw, like one of those little yellow and green gas-powered rickshaws, tuk-tuks.
Absolutely brilliant fun.
Yeah, I saw the sunset at the Taj Mahal. I saw the sunrise at the Taj Mahal. It's not the first time I've seen that, but it's always a pleasant sight. And I got to throw powdered paint at many, many people in Jaipur for the Holi festival.
I was going to say you were there for the Holi festival, Festival of Light, or Festival of Colour.
It is the Festival of Colour. I think the Festival of Light is Diwali, isn't it?
It is.
This is a different festival. They don't need much of an excuse for a party, people in India. They love a party. But yeah, it's absolutely amazing. It was all for a good cause, and yeah, fabulous time with some really fabulous people. But obviously that meant that we had our 80s special last week. So we are what are we covering off this week, Tom? What are we doing? What are we doing?
Well, we've got a real good mix of movies that we've been out and about and seen. So yeah, I know for a fact you've been to see the new Godzilla times Kong New Empire.
Godzilla multiplied by Kong. I can't get that out of my head every time I see the title.
Yeah,
I think it's meant to be something like. Is that the intention? You don't have a Godzilla one or a Ghostbusters one?
No, I've gone with Drive Away Dolls. That's the one we're going to be doing the review.
It's his lack of organisation comes down to the fact that he completely forgot we're supposed to be recording this at 9 o'clock tonight. I've been sat here for the last 45 minutes.
And then anyway. we've been proactive and we've already booked our movie for next week. So we're gonna
go and see Monkey Man.
We're gonna see Monkey Man, which is rated 18, and haven't seen some of the trailers.
It looks really visceral. It looks really action packed. I'm looking forward to seeing that one.
Yeah, it feels to me. It feels like Bollywood on speed mixed in with a bit of Hollywood, and it's set in India. I think it's going to be an absolutely rip-roaring classic adventure, stroke action. So I'm looking forward to that.
Right. So moving on to our did you see anything while I was away?
Did I see anything? I rewatched Maverick, the Top Gun movie. I also
is that the 5th or the 6th time?
The second time, actually.
Is that all is that the only you've only seen it twice?
Yeah, I saw it once at the cinema, and
I must have seen it in the cinema.
On the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movies, and I loved it. I was really taken by surprise at how good it was.
Excellent. We can circle back around to that then after we've done Drive Away Dolls, because you never gave that one a score. I've got a score for that one because I went and watched it earlier in the year. So be interesting to see where you scored it at, because I recall that was a very, very good film. So interesting, yeah. Just one of those points to make as well is Top Gun Maverick, which is basically a remake of Star Wars in jets, is one of those films that I would say it gets a relatively good rating, probably late threes if I remember rightly. Remember what I gave it, but you can go and watch it over and over again just purely because the action sequences are so real. You know, they're definitely
Yeah.
in jets doing real jet stuff inside a real. Though, you know, there's of that 2 hour movie, there's 45 minutes of stuff going on there that is just so worth watching over and over again. Which is why I could go back to the cinema and I kept going back to watch it again because it was so endlessly entertaining. It's not by any means up there with some of the greatest films we've seen this year, but you know, like The Hangovers, for example, it's not anywhere near that kind of level of intriguing or interesting. And watching it one more time. Anyway, so let's start Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Tom, what do you reckon? Is it worth anyone going to watch it this weekend? Is it worth a blast? See what I did there? Blast. You see what I did? Blast.
Yeah,
blast,
exactly. Do you know what? For a bit of 80s nostalgia, yeah, definitely worth.
It's got a lot of that, hasn't it?
Yes, it has got a lot of that. That's why I sort of dropped that one in there.
Yeah. We'll get into the details about that stuff next week, I think.
It's
but
it's an entertaining film. Yeah. So, very quickly, it's bringing together a lot of the original cast from the 1980s version. Up to date with the existing new cast members, and you've got a bit of a rip roaring entertainment adventure through the heart of New York, which, funny enough, was filmed in Canada. But apart from that, it was.
Don't give away the secrets, Tom. Don't give away the secrets.
But yeah,
it's
you know what?
The mounted Mounties that give it away.
Yeah, it's. Again, it's a bit like the franchise, the bandwagon jumping on and trying to get another movie knocked out very quickly. But do you know what? As a entertaining movie, yeah, it's worthwhile popping along to the cinema this weekend and watching it. But I know we're going to more of an in-depth review next week, so I don't want to give any spoilers away this week.
Yeah. It's I agree. It's worth watching. It's it hits the nostalgia button. It's a bit like, you know, Mario Brothers. If you grew up, if you were born in sort of like the mid to late 70s or the 80s, like myself, you will have watched the Mario Brothers movie, and it's just every 5 seconds it's hitting that nostalgia drug, which I'm sure they just intravenously fed into you in the cinema. And that's what this movie is trying to do a lot of. So there's a lot of stuff in there for, you know, anyone who's 40 to 60. There's lots of stuff in there for the kids. It's well worth watching. Yeah, you won't be disappointed. It'll be a great day out for the family. Even a relatively good date night movie for because I think there's a bit lacking in that department at the moment. So yeah, recommend a watch that one. And we will give you more on that next week. So I did go to see Godzilla times Kong, Godzilla multiply Kong, New Empire, and I'll be completely frank with you, my expectations for this movie were low. Really low. I basically dug a big hole, realized it wasn't deep enough, went and found that deepest borehole ever in Russia, which is about 20 kilometers deep, dropped it in there, realized that wasn't low enough, dropped a bobbin after it to kind of get it lower. Then I realized that space is not neither up nor down. So if I launch it into space and just send it off out of the solar system, that's technically down. And that's what I did. So it's somewhere on the other side of the Milky Way at the moment. That's how low my expectations of this movie were based on the last one. There was also the brilliant Godzilla -1, which I think won some Oscars, didn't it, for special effects?
It did.
That also is, you know, that the Japanese just went, Western filmmakers, this is how you do it on a much smaller budget. And having said all that, I actually quite enjoyed it. It's not as good as the Japanese one. It's still quite a fair way off it, but I don't know if it's because my expectations were very low. I did get some feedback from Ben today because he went and watched it with some of his friends, and he said it was excellent. He really enjoyed it. So I suspect that you won't be disappointed if you go and watch this at the cinema as well. It's rated PG-13, so it's okay for the kids to watch. You know, while it is a monster movie, it's more fun. It's a bit more like Skull Island with the scary bits taken out of it. You know, it's a bit more fun. Segues to some older music, some 90s tunes thrown in there. So yeah, it's good. Yeah, surprisingly good film. very, very surprised, very, very happily surprised as well. I went along to watch it just because I thought one of us better do that, just to throw a review in there. But yeah, I think if you picked Ghostbusters or Kong times Godzilla times Kong, and you've got kids this weekend, I don't think either of them are going to be particularly one over the other at this point in time. If you're a big Ghostbusters fan, obviously go with the Ghostbusters. If you're a big Godzilla fan, then you know you got your pick.
Yeah.
I think that's everything for our overviews. We'll have some more in-depth stuff. Tom's got something.
Well, I've also just realised I watched another movie.
What did you watch?
I watched the new Jake Gyllenhaal Roadhouse movie, which is obviously
a
movie, remake,
or is that a series? I thought it was a series.
No, it's a movie. It's on Amazon Prime, so it is being screened.
Roadhouse, Patrick Swayze.
It is a remake of the Patrick Swayze movie. Now, I have to be honest.
Yes.
I can't remember watching the original. And
really?
having now watched, and having now watched the Jake Gyllenhaal version, I don't think I have seen the original, so I will watching the original at some stage.
I reckon as some homework. It's not so much punishment for being late today because it's actually quite a good film. But I reckon you should watch the Patrick Swayze one and then report back on the two next week. But before you do that, is it worth watching the Jake Gyllenhaal one?
Well, because I haven't seen the original, I enjoyed this one.
But as a standalone, is it good? Is it a good film?
Yeah, as a standalone, yeah, no problem.
Interesting. Okay.
However,
yes,
the acting from Conor McGregor, who is the MMA.
Oh, he's a UFC
wrestling
fighter, isn't he, or something?
Yeah, he's a UFC fighter, whatever fighter he is. I couldn't work out if he was trying to pretend to be an American pretending to be an Irishman, or he's just an Irishman who just
Are you critiquing Conor McGregor's acting skills? Because
I was, yeah, he'd probably beat the crap out of me.
He's joining us next week on the podcast, Tom.
But as an entertaining movie, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a bit of, I want to say, swashbuckling fun. It was a load of action, loads of fighting, but a bit of comedy thrown in as well. The
original's very much an 80s movie. It's very much one of those. Do you know what? It's a bit like an extended Knight Rider or A-Team's concept idea. So essentially, it's a small town. Guy turns up at a bar, takes a job as a bouncer. And it turns out, I can't quite remember what his background was, but he was a very highly skilled martial artist, which means
he was a karate expert.
Yeah, and then he takes on the local rich dude who, is who's going to shut the bar down and tries to have his wily ways with the young lady who works there or owns it or something. It's very, like that kind of that Saturday morning American TV mentality of moving on from the next town to the next town to the next town every week. The movie had concept, but it was sort of 90 minutes long with Patrick Swayze absolutely kicking the crap out of everybody, and it was very entertaining. It's very well made. It's a bit of a cult classic.
And just change Patrick Swayze to Jake Gyllenhaal. That's pretty much described the whole film.
Maybe, I mean, it was pretty bloody. The original one, there's a particular move he uses to dispatch the people he doesn't like the most, and it's quite. He goes for the throat. He goes for the jugular. Does Jake Gyllenhaal do that?
No. See, interestingly, a friend of mine has watched this with his wife, and they watched the original.
Yeah.
And his wife turned around and said, "Oh my goodness, this is far too graphic. There's too much adult action in there." Now there isn't in new version, so I'm like, okay,
it's a product of its time.
Yeah.
Because the original Roadhouse, again, it's an 80s movie, and 80s action movies they're far more gory. And as I say, he goes for the old jugular on his special move to dispatch the bad guys. Because again, it's like a video game. He's got a special move to do away with the worst of them. And it's like literally he goes for the throat. And if it was in the new one, exactly what I was talking about.
That's right. It's not. It's not.
Well, there you go. You got some homework for next week then. So that's good. I'll check that out if I can before the podcast. So that brings us to Drive Away Dolls, Tom.
Yes.
An in-depth review of possibly the most right of centre, left left kind of. I don't mean politically. I mean it's so off the center, isn't it? This film. It's kind. Yeah.
It's a really interesting movie because we had seen a couple of trailers, and I have to say I was quite impressed with the trailers, and I'm thinking I'm quite curious to see what this film's all about. And a preconceived idea, I had this image of Thelma and Louise driving off into the sunset. This movie is so left field. It's quite a short movie, hour and 24 minutes.
Got some
rated,
excellent cast members.
Yeah, it's rated 15. It's directed by the Coen brothers, so Ethan Coen. And I will be very open and honest about this. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. There is no middle ground with this movie. And it is filmed in a couple of different styles. And throughout this movie, very 70s psychedelic flashbacks. And it even goes in psychedelic colors, and it's as if you're tripping on LSD.
Yeah, there are moments where you think the Coen brothers were literally taking LSD while they were making this movie, and I don't quite understand why those moments are in there, because I don't know how much they add to it or what the purpose of them are. But just to give everyone a bit of an overview of what actually goes on in this film, so I've got a very brief overview. So basically what you've got is you've got two young ladies, Jamie and Marion, and in search of a fresh start, these two young women embark on an impromptu road trip to Tallahassee, Florida. However, things essentially they hire a car, and it's like the Twins. You remember the Twins film of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito? And they accidentally pick up that car that's got the drug dealer's stuff in it. So they end up being chased out. They're all the way through the film. There's the bad guy following them around trying to find the car. It's a bit like that. There's they picked up this car. They've been accidentally given the wrong car. And in the car, there's some interesting items, isn't there, Tom?
There is. And so, just to add to that sort of really good overview insight. Right, this film, all I would describe, this film grabs you by the throat from the opening scene till the very end, and grabs you round the face multiple times. And I think I leant over to you and went, "Are we in Raymond's Review Bar in Soho watching a soft porn movie?" Because the opening scene is two ladies very much enjoying each other and pleasuring themselves, and it's
they're
like
lesbians. Yeah,
well, yeah, they're lesbians and they're enjoying each other, but it is they're
lesbians and they're having sex. That's it.
And it's very graphic. And I'm like,
it is very graphic.
Well, that's different. That's a great start to.
Do you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of that moment in the Elton John. Yeah. When what was his name? I can't remember the guy's name, but Taron Egerton, and they go straight into that sex scene with that guy. There's like the two, Taron Egerton and the other chap, the Irish guy, and you're sort of sitting there going, I'm not bothered by the fact that it's two gay men. I'm just bothered by the fact that this is a sex scene in the middle of this book.
So graphic.
It's like, because it doesn't, in the day and age of Marvel movies and trying to sell a movie to the widest possible audience you possibly can, Ghostbusters, take notes here. Things are lost, which normal adults would go to a cinema and go, oh, this actually adds some context. And the fact that this thing basically you around the face the minute you start watching it with these graphic scenes is kind of like just sets you up for what's going on, because then it allows for all of the character between these what drives these two characters. One is very straight, she's very uptight, proper conservative, and the other is not. And because you see that scene from the very beginning, when she comes up with lines, it works. It's not so jarring. You can kind of get into the relationship and see what's going to happen and how these two characters interact and how they grow closer together and further apart and things like that. So it's got, I don't know how deliberate that was, but to me, it just helps. It's like it's kind of like sitting there and bashing the rust off of a hinge or something, like it's just making sure you are prepared for what's coming. If if you get through that first scene and you're like, this is not for me, then you should probably move on at that point. But there's it has everything. It has intrigue, it's got some drama in it, it's got tons of comedy. Very, very funny film.
But it's
Yeah.
interesting. So the concept of the film is these gangsters, these criminals, they arrange for a car to be from a car hire place.
Yeah.
And it has to be driven to a place called Tallahassee.
Yep.
And in between that phone call, these two girls literally walk into the car hire show or the car hire place and says, "We're going on a road trip to Tallahassee. We're going to Tallahassee."
Because who would go to Tallahassee?
Yeah, and the owner's like, "Oh, you're here already."
Oh, okay,
so
you're here
he
already.
gives them the car. Here's the keys. Off you go. And next
Which I'm sure is
a
similar thing that happens in Twins. I'm sure that's the same thing.
Is.
Danny DeVito turns up and says, "I'm going here," and he says, "Oh, you're here to collect the car for there." You say, "What do I look like, an idiot?" To collect this. Well, I just said, "Give me the keys for the car," and off they go. And it's sort of a similar thing with here.
And then 5 minutes later, the criminals turn up, going, "We're here to collect the car," and he's like, "But you've already collected it." "No, we haven't. We've only just arrived." So there's a very violent scene when they beat him up and like, "Who did you give the car to?" And then it just becomes this comical chase across America trying to catch up these two girls. And you end up going into an American college of were they cheerleaders, or there was some high school team that all play together, but they all play together, and then they're literally doing pass the parcel with people.
That's where the film takes the mickey out of itself to some extent, because what it's doing is it's playing off the stereotype that all female hockey players or football players are gay. Yeah. And obviously they're not. But it plays off that stereotype, and it does it quite well. It's quite funny. So I love the use of Pedro Pascal in this movie, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, it's massive superstar at the moment. He's in it for the first couple of minutes of the film, and his part is just brilliant.
He's gone.
And then who turns up at the end?
Matt Damon.
Matt Damon. Miley Cyrus is in the she's portrayed as some sort of femme fatale kind of what's the French word for sex worker, like a Moulin Rouge kind of thing. She's a highly played lady of the night, she wrongs Matt Damon's character, who's a senator, and this is what I love. They go to Florida. So it's the Coen brothers are obviously sticking a knife into Ron DeSantis, the senator of Florida here. He's very conservative, he's burning books and all sorts of things at the moment. And it's kind of like Matt Damon plays that kind of conservative Republican senator who's actually got up to some things he should not have got up to when he was a kid. But it's all right, because we all do silly things when we're young men or women. But now, because he's an ultra-conservative senator, he's got people running around the country shooting people and kidnapping people in order to hide this secret. We won't give away what's in the case, because that's one of the funniest moments of the one of the funniest moments of the movie is when you find out what's in the flipping case, because it's not what you think it is. But I loved that. I thought he's really having a dig at possibly the most right-wing conservative in the country, because Trump is not conservative. He is just what Trump is. He's a populist. But I thought that was just brilliant. The Senator Channel, and he's channeling Ron DeSantis at certain points in this movie. It's really, really funny. Miley Cyrus turning up because she really shows up in those kind of there's sort of sequences which are dream sequences that like someone's out of their head on LSD. There's a very small cast, but everyone in it's brilliant. I loved Suki. Beanie Feldstein plays Suki. She is the lady who is fantastic moment where there's that poor guy who's at the car rental place and he's lying on the ground. He's not been, he's been injured, and she's at the
he's had
door
the
and she's
crap
looking around
beaten out
like
of
it's a
him.
bling copper. She's been told that there's a problem there, and she's just like, she just looks through the window. There's nothing going on in here, and she storms off while this poor guy's on the floor going, "Help!" Yeah, it's I was properly impressed with this. I have to say, I thought it was really, really entertaining. It was very off the wall, and yeah, I was properly entertained by this. I have to admit.
And I'll go back to my original statement. I'm going to love this or hate this. And looking on IMDb and reviewing or reading some of the reviews, it goes from one extreme to the other. It's no middle ground.
Have you
You
read some
will,
of the reviews?
yeah, and it's really interesting.
I
Some
have.
people love
I've
it, and
avoided them.
others, yeah, and others hate it. So for me, this was something completely different. It goes against everything we've seen recently
Yep.
from Hollywood, and I really enjoyed it. It
Do
felt
you?
like it. You know, when you watch one of the Beatles films, a bit like the Yellow Submarine, so it all goes a bit cartoony. It felt like that style of filming. So for
It's
me,
definitely an off-the-wall movie. It's a one-off kind of film. It's not part of a franchise. And I think we're going to see, like we said a couple of weeks ago, I think we're going to see more of these types of films because they're filling in the gaps around the Marvel releases. I also
yeah,
think we're going to see more of the kind of Amazon Prime sort of releases like The Beekeeper, which would have gone straight to streaming, coming out in the cinema, fill in the gaps from the Marvel movies. And uh, I don't think that's a bad thing. This film cost £6.4 million to make, and it probably cost about, well, I mean, it didn't get a huge amount of advertisement other than the trailers. I mean, it's relying a lot on stuff like this, like our podcast and other things. Hopefully, it's not relying on just our podcast because it won't
it'd
make
be in
any money.
trouble.
But do you know what I mean? It's
Unless
relying
our
on word of
50
mouth.
unless our 50 listeners go to watch it 50 times each.
Had to watch it a lot more than that to make back £6.4 million, but or dollars, sorry. But that's a contrast. You see, $6.4 million
Oh,
against the
it's
$100
nothing.
million that
Yes.
Godzilla was. I mean, Godzilla times Kong is the cheapest monster movie they've made so far. And I knew that going into it, and I was very surprised at the quality of the CGI and special effects, considering that this is a cheaper movie. This is a cheaper movie to make, but $6.4 million, it's nothing in the box office
No.
world. If this film makes back $15 million, that's a huge return on your investment. I'd rather have 20 films like this a week than one Marvel movie that is, I don't mind having two Marvel or three Marvel movies a year. Yeah, they're great. I like Mission Impossible movies. One every couple of years is fine. I get the way the Marvel system works. I'm happy with them to keep churning those films out because they're entertaining for what they are. They're a bit like a fast food burger. It's not gourmet and you can't eat it, but they're great for every now and again. It's when everything in the cinema is Marvel or MCU or DCEU. It's just at that point you're like, come on, give me a bit of variety and a little bit of creativity. And there must be plenty of movie makers like the Coen brothers, like the chap who made Oppenheimer, the lady who made Barbie, sitting there thinking, we can do like Greta Gerwig, just sitting there going, we can do more and better things than this, we can do better. And this is a great example. This is well worth watching. It's not a movie for kids. I wouldn't recommend it for anyone who is very, very conservative, but I don't know many people who are that conservative, to be honest with you. I think everyone I know would probably enjoy watching this, or at least, watch it and go, well, I didn't enjoy it, but, it's quite an interesting movie. So,
What are you going to
yeah,
score it?
I'm going to score it at, I'm going to give it a 3.9.
That's interesting. That's really interesting because I was thinking 3.7.
Yeah, because I'm thinking it's not above 4 there for me in regards to it's not something I would expect to see winning Oscars, but it's a little bit like that comedy we watched, No Hard Feelings. It's sort of like that, you know, it's doing a job really, really well. It's not American Pie, but it's doing a job really, really well. And this, again, is the same thing. It's just doing a brilliant job of being a very, very entertaining film. And hats off to the guys that made it, to the writers, to the actors. They are all fabulous. You're going with 3.7, yeah?
I am, yeah.
Interesting.
And you wanted me to give my on Wonka as well.
So tell us what's give us that was last year's came out last year, but I gave it 4.2 actually. It's a bit high. I was
no. See, interestingly, I've given it exactly 4.2, and I hadn't remembered what score you gave it. Now, we had my mother-in-law came to stay with us last weekend, and she is not one for violence. She's not one for swearing or like big shoot 'em up films. So I said to her, "Come round, have dinner." And she was going to stay over, so I said, "Look, we'll put a movie on." And I said, "I haven't seen Wonka. I understand it's pretty good." So she went, "Brilliant. Yeah, I look forward to seeing that." Wow, what a film! No violence, no swearing, no nudity or sex or anything. Really entertaining, great comedy, but actually a really good cast as well, and a lot of really good British.
No child abuse and no slave labour in this one either, unlike the first one. In actual fact, it's a big of the character, the Oompa Loompa character played by Hugh Grant, that he is, you know, he has attitude. He's like, I'm in charge. You're not in charge of me. You know, I'm in charge here. He's got like all sorts of gizmos and everything. Yeah, it's a great family entertainment movie. And at no point does Timothée Chalamet move in slow motion.
No, he
which
doesn't.
Is quite surprising for him. Not at one point. And there's no sand either. Oh no, there might be a little bit of sand. There was a bit of sand at one point. There's a beach where he goes ashore, but that's the only bit of sand in the whole movie with Timothée Chalamet.
And there was no worms that you had to get on top of.
He wasn't riding any giant worms, no. There were some bugs in it, but he wasn't riding any giant worms, no. No. That's it is. I think it's a little bit underrated, Wonka, on the wider sort of in the wider world, I think. You know,
but I also think Olivia Colman again. So we saw her recently in Wicked Little Letters. So for her playing the landlady or the owner of the hotel,
she does.
She was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I can't remember the comedian that plays her a male love interest stroke partner that helps her sort of get people off the street into the hotel. He was absolutely he tends to be in A League of Their Own.
Steele, I think his name is.
Okay, well, he was brilliant. You've also got a number of the actors from Horrible Histories in there as well, and they all came together brilliantly. Matt Lucas as one of the other chocolatiers, he was fantastic, and he kept coming liners because we want them dead, stuff like that. It was just really good, entertaining comedy. So great movie, really enjoyable.
It wasn't Mark Steele, sorry, it's Tom Davis. He's a writer. He did this brilliant thing where he was this comedy show where he was a copper, and it was like a Luther copper, you know. So he's like a big guy, raincoat, and he'd turn up and he'd start doing the whole, you know, deep dark voice of Luther. But then he would end up, you know, falling down the stairs. Slapstick comedy. I'll have to look it up. It was very, very funny. But he's generally he's a writer, I believe, as well. Writer, comedian, actor, I believe. Tom Davis on Wonders of Working with Tom, an English actor and comedian best known for his role as D.I. Sleet in the BBC free comedy Murder in Successville, and as Gary King in the BBC sitcom King Gary. Successville is well worth a little watch.
I've not seen
very funny short series. It was like one of those BBC Three series that they sort of fund to, because the BBC has to do. So for some of our non-UK listeners, and even for some of the UK listeners, they don't really understand what the BBC is. The BBC has to do all sorts of things to fulfil its role as a public broadcaster. So they fund all kinds of people. And Tom Davis is the sort of person that might have struggled to find his way into the mainstream, but because of the BBC, he was given an opportunity to do something which was out of date. I mean, the sort of the D.I. Sleet thing reminds me of comedy from the 90s and the late 80s. It's that kind of situational comedy, kind of bit slapstick, kind of silly stuff and things like that. But because he's so very good at it and he's very talented, it was the BBC gave him a shot with a small funding, and they did a lot of filming in Wales in old buildings and just made them look at like a police station. Really, really good stuff. Anyway, fantastic. Brilliant. That's this week then.
I know.
Tom,
wrapped up really quickly.
We're done.
Quite nicely.
That's it. Yes, we've got a new rule. Try and keep it to 30 minutes. We're at 35 minutes. So, Tom, do you want to say goodbye to the ladies and gentlemen?
I will indeed. Thank you very much.
And you've got like 30 seconds.
So, like, subscribe, share. Let us know of any movies you want us to review. Thank you as always for listening. And as always, good night, Russell.
Share the podcast. Like, subscribe. We're on YouTube now. And we will be back next week with, what the hell are we coming back with next week? Oh, yeah.
Monkey Man.
We'll have an overview of Monkey Man and in-depth reviews of Godzilla times Kong and Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Until then, have fun. Have a great weekend. Goodbye. Right. Excellent.
That was pretty good, actually.
Stop recording.